welcome to a brand new video. My name is Alexa Disventure Camp, and today we are going to be doing What If Dan got the idol instead of Gabby, and this is the 1,700 subscriber special. Thank you all so much for all of the support on this channel. Alrighty, before we get a few things to note. First off, this background footage shown right here is owned by Animation Cartoons. And secondly, thank you so much to the people who suggested this idea. Their credits will be in the description because there are multiple people who asked this idea, and yeah. Alrighty, so before we get into the actual what if, I want to say how Dan would actually get the idol. So canon is gonna have to actually change a little bit for this to work into the storyline, so bear with me here. Dan tells Gabby to do what she wants or what she feels is right. Dan, being a strategic person, tells Gabby he's got to go do something and he'll catch up in a second or so, and to tell others that if they ask where he is. She agrees and begins to continue to run forward while Dan stays behind and looks for the idol, finding it under a rock. Finding it under the rock that originally Gabby found it. Now, before you say this is out of character for Dan to do, he doesn't have a character basically pretty much at all, so I mean, and he was willing to lie to Gabby originally, so I don't see why he wouldn't be willing to do it here, especially when he doesn't even know her pretty much at all here. So anyways, let's just get right into the video. Enjoy! Alrighty, now you might notice real quick that episode 1 isn't here. It's due to the fact that the idol is not mentioned or done at all until the next episode, so nothing in episode 1 would change, so there's no really reason to go over it. Alrighty, so in episode 2, the morning events remain the same during challenge. Again, Gabby doesn't stop to look for the idol, she just runs up, so Jake just says that he can't see Dan and things, and everything else remains the same. Despite going to get the idol, I still see Purple losing, as they still lost when Dan and Gabby took long originally when trying to find the, well, of course they were trying to find Dan's glasses, but when Gabby found that, you get my point. So I do still see Purple Team losing, and again, all the events with Purple Team remain the same, which means Will is still eliminated in episode 2. Alrighty, episode 3. So Gabby did originally go to see Ellie to tell her she'll save her with the idol. However, I still think she'll do it as she still wants to see Ellie become friends with her and stuff like that. It was just kind of an addition, and plus they can still be happy, okay? Okay? Alrighty. So everything else morning-wise does remain the same. Challenge-wise, Dan having the idol doesn't affect really anything here. Like, he's not gonna really use for anything, but anyway. Purple is still winning with Tom losing it for Teal, and I don't think Dan would actually use his idol here. He does trust the guys before the vote, and you have to use the totem before the votes are read. So, the guys' alliance is still all created and stuff, and Drew is still eliminated with Gabby scraping by. Alrighty, episode 4. Dan, though feeling insecure, knows he has his idol here. As remember, when he was about the guys not being trusted, he still isn't a bit insecure, but he knows he has his idol. Anyway, he still does try to do a talk to Gabby and try to apologize, but she's much more against it, given the fact he lied twice. I don't know if she figured that out, but I mean, still, I do think she'd be somewhat against it, like in the challenge. And again, here, nothing really changes. Dan having an idol won't cause him to beat Ashley in the challenge, and even then, Teal still would win in the end, so. And since Nick's a stupid idiot here. Anyways, Nick's still eliminated. I know there's not much changes yet, but I promise it is coming very soon, and the changes are extravagant. Anyway, episode 5. The phone calls aren't affected much. Obviously, we don't see Dan's call fully, but I'm doubting Dan is stupid enough to tell whoever Franny is, yeah, I got the idol, since there are people there, Tom and Jake. He's not the brightest in the book, but he's not that dumb, so nothing much changes here. Dan still struggles with everything along with the others, but Gabby and Ellie still vows to help each other. Gabby still goes to the purple team because I do still see Teal team winning, as Jake and Miriam is still there to cook, and yeah, let's be real, ain't no one being Jake and Miriam's cooking, especially after Fiori with the disaster they created. But despite having the idol here, I do still think Dan wouldn't want to make any enemies due to the fact he doesn't want to use the idol soon. He wants to keep it, so he still wouldn't volunteer. Anyways, Ashley and Lil are still eliminated like in canon. Alrighty, episode 6. So Dan still tries to apologize to Gabby, but it doesn't work times 2. Anyway, Dan still goes into that hole and everything. I do still view Alec and Gabby as the winners respectively in this challenge and in this episode, so I don't think Dan having the idol would affect this. And though Gabby wouldn't ask Ellie about the idol, it doesn't change much since Ellie was stupid and really overconfident, like, whatever. Anyway, Dan would be happy to have the alliance with Miriam when it is offered to him, because again, he hasn't really had a trustworthy alliance, so he views the Miriam one helpful a bit. Anyway, Ellie's robbed and should have won the season, and Gret gets eliminated here. And no, they swap teams. Whoopsies. Anyways, episode 7. So, purple team remains the same. Teal team is like, Dan is still so willing to target Ellie. Anyway, Dan's apology finally works as Gabby is finally happy with Ellie here. Fiori screws over Dan, which screws over the team, and anyway, we can finally have a change. Woohoo! Gabby tells Dan that she isn't gonna vote for Ellie, and Miriam goes to Tom. You can argue that Dan would play his idol here due to that, but it's shown he does trust Miriam, so I really don't think he would, and he was still really shocked when he's like, wait, you have the idol, Gabby? He was fully shocked. He didn't expect that, so I don't see it happening. Ellie gets robbed here and gets booted because due to the fact that the majority votes to be on her because Dan and Miriam, again, the votes remain the same except no. Gabby and Ellie scene from episode 8 carries over to here. However, this time Gabby swears to get vengeance and go on for Ellie. And so Ellie gets robbed. No other reason. Anyway, so it's episode 8. Gabby is opened up with just being sadder than usual. Jake as well, losing the friend he did have, along with the Tom situation. And it doesn't do really well with him. Dan, on the other hand, is more planning for the future of his game and is just thinking about what to do. I do think Miriam will be comforting Jake a bit or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, merch, same thing as original. Fiori plans to tell some lies to give them against one another. Dan tries to apologize to Gabby, which she simply nods to. She is still devastated that Ellie is gone. Alec would offer to go with Gabby and invite Gabby specifically, where Gabby would just say everything, and the two, I think, would form a slight bond. Alec would suggest to Fiori to not tell lies about Gabby, as the two could work together. In the original, that the reason that they told lies about Ellie and Gabby is because there was already a shaky, but without it really happening and no one really betraying each other here, I don't think it would really work, or if the lies they try, I don't think it would. My point? So, again, and Fiori isn't trustworthy, and even if anyone believes the lie, the only one who would really believe it in this universe is Jake, and Miriam can knock some sense into him. It might not be easy, but she can try, you know what I mean? Anyway, I do think Fiori and Alec and Gret are targeted during the challenge, more so Gret, because, like, everyone hates Gret, and there's no one to distract it, because, again, even if Fiori tried to lie, again, no one really betrayed. Like, Gabby obviously didn't vote with them, but I don't think that's enough. I think it's the idol that really sealed the betrayal, so I don't think it would work again. So, I do think that these three are targeted and out. Maybe not Fiori as much, but this challenge is really hard to decipher who would win, because it's like, it's so chance-driven because they have to choose and vote. So, for simplicity, I used a wheel. I used a wheel between these three right here because I feel like they were together and target to get these people out more so. Maybe not, like, but you get my point, they'd all try to get Gret. And even so, I feel like Gret's the only one here that would really target. So I'm just going to assume Jake is immunity because the wheel said so, and this is way too hard of a challenge to really decipher who would get it. So, yeah. And again, it doesn't really, as long as in Gret, I don't think we get immunity. That's the element that really changes up everything here. So, for votes, I think Dan would go to Gabby and say they were going to be voting for Gret. Because I feel like these people would target Gret because, A, Gret screwed up Tom and Jake, and Miriam's pissed about that, and Gret should have gone a bit ago, so, yeah. And then we have Gabby and Dan would probably hear the vote from her, go to Gabby, talk about it with her, and there's that. And then you just have these three voting together, but even so, who would Gret, Alec, and Fiori vote? Gret would want Gabby out, even though Alec, I feel like, would fight that as viewing that as not intelligent, and plus the little bond they formed. But Gret is fixated on her revenge. So I feel like even after all that, they would eventually just vote for Gabby and just deal with Gret's not smart move here. And then Fiori is exposed this round due to the confessionals, and Gabby is so happy Gret is gone for good. The beautiful thing of revenge. Episode 9. So Gabby and Dan talk about it all, and I feel like they make up a bit, or just become on good terms a bit here. Miriam is simply happy about Tom and Jake making up, and Tom and Jake make up. Alec and Fiori discuss how they can save themselves. During the apocalypse, I do think Gabby is winning. I cannot be convinced otherwise. This is Gabby, for goodness sake. She would easily destroy everyone here. And I know it's more of like the Hunger Games, but let's be real. She'd win that too. This is Gabby, for goodness sakes. I am fully convinced in that. Even if they all target one another, I just see Gabby having the strength she can to win it all and just beat everyone here. I again, convinced. So, with Gabby and mute, even if Alec and Fiori know that it's, you know what I mean, I still think it would happen. Anyway, so Alec and Fiori would try to talk to Gabby as she is immune, and showing how Jake, Tom, and Miriam would get her out, so kind of using the same reason they used on Ellie. And they needed to team to save themselves. I feel like Gabby would just think about it and go to Dan telling him about it. And despite both Gabby and Dan disliking Alec and Fiori, I feel like Gabby was willing to work with them in episode 8. I'm not too sure she'd still be willing, but I don't see why she wouldn't fully. And again, she would probably want to stay in to get some revenge for Ellie, as Tom did vote her out, and she is probably like wanting to get the people who did vote Ellie out. That's not Dan, because again, Dan and her made up and he apologized. Tom would not apologize for this. Anyways, and get the money needed for her. It's never specifically stated if Ellie ever told Gabby about the money problem she had. It's never shown. But even so, I feel like she'd be like, I need to win this for Ellie. And then Dan would want to stay in because he just does. I mean, this is Dan. He wants to stay in. He's strategic. It's $1 million. So, and I think they'd choose Tom to eliminate. First off, Tom is a very huge challenge threat. Again, Fiori said it herself, the biggest threat and challenges, that's Tom, and I feel like that remains true here. So he's a huge threat in terms of challenges. Gabby stated Tom acted strange, plus I feel like Tom voting for Ellie would further that point for her. And plus, Dan doesn't know who to trust between Jake and Tom, and I feel like it'd be spread that, by this point, that Tom did betray the guys' alliance and voted for Drew and stuff like that. So I feel like it would have spread out by this point. So Dan knowing that Tom betrayed him, Gabby knowing that he voted Ellie and he acts strange, Fiori and Alec knowing he's a huge challenge threat, and at this point they're gonna have to win challenges to save themselves, I feel like Tom is gone. Which shocks Miriam, Jake, and Tom, because I feel like they target Fiori after learning what she did last round. Which means Tom is taken out in episode 9. So, episode 10. Alec and Fiori revel in the fact they survived, and are making new plans to somehow survive this next elimination. Gabby and Dan talk about what happened the previous night and all of that. Jake would be devastated that Tom is gone, and Miriam would try to comfort him. And though she wanted to get Gabby or say Dan out, she knew it would end up being hard. I feel like Miriam would want to get these two betrayers out, but she also knows Fiori and Alec are more sneaky and knows that's a dangerous thing to play with. And plus, Gabby and Dan did side with her at one point, so it might be better to try and get them back on her side again. Anyways, so Alec, Fiori, Miriam, nor Jake won in the original challenge, despite them taking forever, because Ellie somehow managed to speedrun through 10 medals before anyone else came close. 10 medals, you hear me? So since they didn't win the original, I'm just gonna say they don't win here. And between Gabby and Dan, I am 1000% sure Gabby could win it over Dan. Now, the idol for this episode, I cannot say who gets it. Obviously, none of these four do, but saying who Dan or Gabby, I don't really know. I can't say, like, yep, Gabby's gonna go to that exact obstacle at that exact time, and I can't be like, Dan's gonna go there too. It's too much of, like, a chance thing. I can't really decide on that, so I do apologize. However, the idol will not be used here, and plus, Dan still has his idol, so it's not like we don't have any more idols. Dan still has one, and it'll still be used in the game eventually. So we're fine with that, and again, that sounds kind of Gabby because Gabby winning again, but I just don't view how Dan could beat Gabby in any of these challenges. Maybe the eating one at most. That's the only one I would think Gabby would be like, but even so, as long as she gets like I don't know, I guess Gabby wins immunity for simplicity. Again, yeah. Anyway, I think Jake would be fully convinced in getting Dan out because Gabby is immune here, and Dan voted for Tom and betrayed. Like, he knew that Fiori and Alec were gonna vote Tom and stuff, but he blames it more on Dan and Gabby because they betrayed the alliance. And Dan and Miriam would be like, we should probably get one of them out instead, but I don't think Miriam can knock enough sense into Jake now, because earlier I feel like she could because Jake was more calm, but here he is angry. He lost Tom. Well, not full. You get my point. He's out now, and he does not like that, and he'd be very, very mad. So I feel like Miriam couldn't knock enough sense into him to not target Dan. And I feel like Dan would somehow, over here, is that a little plumber? But it makes new drama, okay? It does, and I feel like he'd figure out a way to overhear it, or at least maybe get a little bit of the intel. And knowing this, he'd decide to play his idol that night. I feel like they would, at this point, Jake would be willing to go over to Fiori and Alex, say, hey, vote Dan with us. And though they would be, like, very on it, they want to stay in. They want to stay in any way possible, so they'd be fine with it, and they'd be fine to vote for Dan this round, especially given the fact he had an idol, and they don't know it yet, especially given the fact that just Gabby is immune here, and if Dan is who they have to vote off to save themselves, that's fine. Whoever it is, as long as they can save themselves, it is fine. So Dan would go over to Gabby, since I think again he thinks Gabby is the one person he can trust at the moment, or at least somewhat trust, and he'd tell her, like, who do you want to vote out? So who would they choose to vote out here? I think Dan would be like, we need to get one of Fiori or Alec out. Yes, Jake and Miriam are targeting him, and he'd be pretty mad at that, but Fiori and Alec are both people that are very sneaky and can do what they need to win. Like, they'll be able to sneak through anything. And Gabby, like, but I don't want to vote. Again, remembering the conversation I had earlier, she'd be like, I don't want to vote out. I want to vote who I want. So Dan would be like, asking her, and I feel like under the pressure she wouldn't want to vote. She feels bad she betrayed them and stuff like that, and more so she views Fiori and Alex threats at the point. So even due to the bond earlier, I feel like it would eventually come to voting Alec, because Fiori isn't as good in challenges, and I feel like that's the only deciding factor. Even though Gabby is a bit upset to vote Alec out, she views it like, alright, fine, even though she'd be like sad about it fully. And anyways, Dan plays his idol, Alec is gone, and Fiori and him have a wholesome goodbye. Episode 11. Jake and Miriam are just chatting. Fiori is planning on how on earth to survive here, and Gabby and Dan are just chatting a bit here. Anyway, challenge-wise, Jake gets a flashlight, Miriam gets a flashlight like in the original, and Fiori gets batteries like in the original. Since Gabby is really close to Ellie, I mean, bestie for lifey, or more. But anyways, because they're close, I feel like Gabby would get the flashlight here and Dan gets batteries. I know that's like random reasoning, but it was gonna be randomized anyway. Might as well use a little bit of logic. I feel like Gabby and Dan would try to work together here in the challenge, and because again, they're friends now. They're just been working together for the past few votes, so might as well. And Gabby not being the only one to not vote Dan, I think would be, you know what I mean? They would work together. Jake and Miriam as well, and I feel like Fiori would actually try to side with Jake and Miriam here. She might be annoyed with them and she might hate them. However, Dan just idled out her one and only ally. That's gonna make her angry, let's be real. And plus, Jake and Miriam worked with her last round. She can use that to keep herself in the game. She's got to slide through somehow. She's got to win it somehow. So she'd probably try to gain their trust by not actually sabotaging and just trying to go through. And now, to me, I feel like Gabby and Dan would be running up and trying to segregate nudity when these three come up, and it becomes all-out war. Miriam threw a flashlight in the original, so I see her doing it again. I mean, she might not care for Gabby and Dan, but at this point, they've gone against her so much that they're just opposite sides, so she'd throw a flashlight at Gabby or Dan and that makes everyone angry, and then maybe even Fiori follows suit. It's all just chaos. So I do think that Fiori should just win immunity for once in her life. Jokes aside, but I feel like she managed to sneak through the chaos even if she threw a flashlight, and just sneak through all the chaos and the fighting that was happening, and just climb herself up that ladder and win it. I think it would be able to happen for her. So, and again, Fiori would go to Jake and Miriam and offer to vote off Dan. But they would mention that Gabby has been a decent challenge threat, winning the last few immunities as well. But I feel like Fiori would be like, we're three people, we can beat one person who can win challenges. And I think she'd view someone with an idol as a bigger threat than someone's decent in challenges. Plus, Gabby had actually worked with Fiori a bit. And, like, obviously she's mad, but even then, it isn't Gabby's direct fault that Alec went. Yeah, she voted for him, but it's the idol that Dan played that really caused Alec to go out, really caused her one and only ally to leave. So I think she'd view that as a bigger issue. And even though I feel like Miriam and Jake would be leaning a bit towards Gabby, if Fiori, the deciding vote, is willing to go for Dan, and that's not them, they're willing to do it for one round, and plus they can get Gabby out next if need be in their minds. So Dan is gone, and Gabby and Dan have just a sweet goodbye. And yeah, Dan might have an idol, but that only saves him for 4 more episodes. We move on to episode 12. Jake and Miriam have a wholesome bond, with Fiori trying to talk to Gabby into working with her. Fiori knows that these two are a duo, and she's screwed if she goes to the final with them. So she'd rather try to work with Gabby here and save herself. Anyways, the duos are Miriam and Fiori, like in the canon, and that leaves Gabby and Jake to work together. Jake and Gabby win the first round here, I feel, because I am fully convinced that Miriam would still throw Fiori off a cliff. Come on. She would be willing to do it. And since she misses, I'm doubting Jake's gonna throw. I don't think it, so... And I don't see Gabby, a reason why Gabby wouldn't make the center. I don't see it, so they win there. So the second round here is tug of war. I feel like Gabby is so strong she can do it because this is Gabby. And then Jake would probably just do some assisting, if anything. And then Fiori just gets... The Fiori abuse this episode was insanity. Anyway, so the third round here. Now, obviously, in between some of the rounds, there is some discussion, but even then, I feel like it'd just be Jake and Miriam talking, and Fiori trying really, really hard to convince Gabby, but still. So, in All-Stars, I know I'm going to All-Stars, it has a point. The third round has fire making. We know in All-Stars, Gabby said, and Gabby made fire! First off, wholesome, but secondly, that means Gabby knows how to make fire. How fast does she know it? I don't know. Now, obviously, since All-Stars is in the future, it could have changed between that 2-year time limit, but I'm just gonna assume that Gabby knows how to make fire. I don't have any reason to think she don't, especially when they did it years in the future, so I'm just gonna assume she does. Plus, the only reason Miriam and Fiori actually managed to win is because Ellie helped them cheat. In this universe, no one's helping each other cheat, because I feel like Miriam would be like, it's fine, you can just convince Gabby to save you, and again, she doesn't care to save Fiori too much. Now, obviously, it's nice to have Fiori in the finals, but even so, I don't know in that respect. But yeah, Jake and Gabby would manage to win thanks to Gabby managing to win the fire making, and they each decide. So Jake obviously is going to choose Miriam to the finals. I don't think we can really debate why he would. Now, Gabby obviously would, after hearing all the convincing with Fiori, she might think it, but Jake would try to convince her to take Miriam, and I feel like I think she'd be willing to take it, because she doesn't really care for Fiori, and Miriam still isn't the best physically, plus I still view it as a possibility, so Fiori is out, we have our finalists. Which this was an interesting one. If a few of the times I did kind of struggle with the reasonings and stuff, but I think it ended up fine. A lot of the plot lines ended up a lot more wholesome, but let's just go into the conclusion of the video. But yep, that was the what if. There were a few things I didn't like. Ellie was so robbed. And there were others I did like. I do like the wholesome endings a lot of the plots got. And again, I prefer the original. I don't know. This is a pretty good elimination order. The only thing I'd really change is get Ellie higher, robbed. But anyways, what did you all think of this what if? I would love to hear it in the comments down below. If you have any critiques for this what if, I would also love to hear it in the comments down below. I always like hearing critiques as it helps me improve my videos and my what ifs. Alrighty, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again on the channel. Bye everybody, see you next time!